Hey everybody, this is Ribo here at the Workbench, and tonight bringing you another watch review. This is the G-Shock DW9052. This specific version is the 9052V-1CR. G-Shock with their ever catchy names, but this is a very this is probably the most entry level G-Shock out there. This is what a lot of people start on because of the price. This is not the normal, I guess, kind of version of the 9052. I think the normal version, it has red accents, not blue, and also has the kind of more typical G-Shock rubber strap. So this is a little bit different, but the the buttons, everything is basically the same. So I wanted to try this one out because of the different strap, and I liked the look of it a little bit more. Yeah, so let's get into the review. All right, so price, you're looking at about $45 brand new. This is, like I said, one of the more entry-level G-Shocks. I think the GA100, which is another very popular model, is maybe around 60 to 100 depending on what configuration you get. But this is one of the more affordable ones. Size-wise, this is a 48.5 millimeter case. So I brought a couple other Casios, one the famous F91W, which I believe is a 38 millimeter. So you can see, yeah, probably 5 on each side there, a lot smaller, obviously a lot thinner. And then my favorite, current favorite, at least long-standing favorite, the GD350, which is huge, but a very good G-Shock. So this is 53 millimeters. And you can see the size comparison between that and the slightly smaller 9052. The 9052, to me, I think in terms of size, one thing that it has going for it is that because of the case design, really you have only the 4 buttons here that are protruding, and so overall it looks much smaller when in reality it's only really 5 millimeters off of this one. The GD350 is massive and it looks massive. This one I think is a pretty large watch, but for the size that it is, looks fairly small. So it definitely has that going for it. All right, so the weight, like all G-Shocks, it's fairly lightweight. I think this is 4.8 ounces, so under 5 is great. In my experience, it kind of disappears on the wrist, except for the strap, which I'll talk about in a second. All right, so usually I talk purpose of watches. So the purpose of this, to me, this is a daily beater. I mean, this particular watch has been well loved and abused. You can see that it's missing the kind of, I'm going to call them cosmetic screws on the side here. There's supposed to be one in each corner. I say that only because if you look closely, they're not really holding these two pieces together. On my 350 here, if I were to take the wings off of the side, you can see that it's much more holding those pieces together, whereas on this one it's not really doing anything, and so I think they're more for show than anything. Usually they have these kind of gray screw protectors. I don't know what you want to call them. Really, it's just for show. Those have all popped off. Like I said, there's a cheaper G-Shock, so it's probably going to show wear a little bit more, but not too bad. I mean, I think besides that, and I'll probably just take that screw out. Besides that, I mean, this thing has been going for years and it, has held up just fine. So yeah, entry-level G-Shock kind of gets a lot of people into G-Shocks who may not want to spend over $100 on a digital watch, and just kind of a daily beater. So nothing too special. This watch, I'll go ahead and do functions now. This does not have a ton of functions, which is kind of to be expected for where it is. If you look at something like the 350, even the GA100, which I don't have on me right now, they're going to do things like world time, multiple alarms. I think this has maybe 5 different alarms, stopwatch, timer. So this is going to do a lot more. This guy does not have a world timer. It has a basic alarm, it has a timer and a stopwatch, and that's it. But it just has a single one of each of those. Nothing too special, which is fine considering the price point. All right, so let's do kind of an overview and my general thoughts. So overview, first thing that is, the first thing that you see on this is the stock strap here. So yes, this does not look like a G-Shock, band, but it is. It's kind of unique. I have not seen this on any other model G-Shock, and it's not even on the other version of this one. And so when you first look at it, I was really, at least in pictures, I was really impressed. It's got this kind of nylon, fairly thick nylon band, much thicker than a NATO, so it looks a little, fairly durable. But then it's got this weird kind of pleather thing going on, and you can hear that anytime the watch moves. And so it's this kind of squeaky, fake leather something that's stitched on here, and the strap retainer is also this kind of fake leather thing. I really hate this. I don't know why they would do this. For one thing, you've just kind of taken away a lot of the water resistance, and even if it's water resistant, it has the same issue as a NATO strap, which is once it gets wet, it's kind of uncomfortable on your wrists. I also do not really think that this would hold up to a lot of water use. I don't really ever use, submerge this watch, in the water, but I'd be interested to see how this piece holds up to someone who does. Either way, I don't think it really looks that good. I think had they just continued the nylon piece, it'd been much better. And I don't think it's super functional. Also, if you'll notice the buckle up here, it's just kind of oddly oversized for the watch that it is. I don't know if that really comes across in camera, but it's a huge buckle. It really just flares out really large. If you look at something like on the 350, it stays pretty much in line with the band. And so that's kind of interesting to me. I do not like it. I think it's kind of just, I don't know, it's random and just kind of odd. And in the 350, the band I like more and more every day. I think I kind of was a little negative about it at first, but yeah, I'm realizing that this is just a great band. And so you can see for a much larger watch in the 350, I don't know, it's got a smaller profile when you look at the band. And so for that reason, this watch is not super comfortable on my hand. On my wrist, just with the stock strap. That's why I swapped this out almost immediately with some adapters from J's and K's, and then put it on a NATO, and I will say it is super comfortable then. I think it really fit the wrist very well. And I really enjoyed wearing the watch at that point, but I did have to switch out the band. So that's kind of one downside, but it is a cheaper watch. If you really care about that, just go for the other version of the 9052, the kind of red accent version. I think if my memory does not deceive me, I believe that you get a rubber strap. Do a quick kind of show you on wrist. So actually wrist check today. I'm wearing my Citizen ProMaster Diver. It's a new watch that I've picked up that I'm really loving. But I'll show you just kind of what the profile looks like on wrist. So the stock strap, one of the things I've noticed is it tends to push the watch up or down. It doesn't really seat it, right there in the middle of your wrist. And so I'd really recommend, if you're going to wear this, get the rubber strap, or do something like a NATO. I think it wears really close to the wrist on a NATO, and I really enjoyed that. All right, so let's see, other kind of overview, the buttons. So typical, and I'm going to keep bringing the 350 on here, but typical G-Shock configuration, 4 buttons. I think it's pretty much every G-Shock is like that. These are obviously called out a little bit more than this one. The buttons are very recessed in here. I've noted this problem on prior G-Shocks like the 100, in that the kind of bumper case really that's supposed to kind of protect the button here goes above and beyond what it's supposed to do, and it really just makes it very difficult to press, and so you really have to kind of reach your fingernail in there and press the buttons, and I'm not a huge fan of that. I'd almost prefer something like this. You see this on the square G-Shocks. You know, the buttons are smaller, but they do protrude. With this, it's very difficult to reach in there. And you know, on the 350, there is no bumper besides the left and right, and so it's much easier to press. Let's see. So the display is pretty typical. You can see it's a two-tone, similar to the 350, which just means that. Well, I won't get into that right now, but two-tone display here. Got some wood shavings. The hazards of doing reviews on a woodworking workbench. So anyway, two-tone display, which is, you know, kind of nice. And so the kind of famous Casio second counters and minute counters here are kind of in a more of a teal color. And then you have a segmented display, and so the kind of I don't know if you've ever disassembled a G-Shock before. You'll know you have the module, and then you have kind of this plastic you know, display piece. I'm not sure exactly what that's called. And so that all that is just really it's kind of segmenting that on top of the module. And so you have the top, which is your date, you have your second counter, and then you have your time at the bottom. That goes all the way through here. I do not believe, well, I'm a little wrong there. So on the timer, it looks like you do get the current time in the top right. I didn't remember that. But that's always good. That's one of the things I really love about the 350 is that you keep the time on all of the secondary screens, which is really nice. This one, I don't think you get on each one. I think the alarm you do not. All right, so segmented display there, and then the backlight. So we'll try to show this. There you go. So the backlight, what's interesting about this, so I talked about the two-tone display of this one. This one also has a two-tone display. When you hit this backlight, though, you are seeing two tones even in the backlight. With this one, it has two tones, and when you hit the backlight, everything's going to look the same color. Not a big deal, but something to note. The backlight is pretty good. It's pretty bright. You know, holds up just fine, and is you know, it is what it is. This one will just, I don't know. Nothing that I've had so far in terms of a digital watch has ever beaten the backlight on the 350. It is just fantastic. But hey, it beats the F91W backlight right there. So if nothing else, it's better than that. But yeah, it's perfectly fine. All right, so yeah, so that's kind of an overview. Obviously the stainless steel back, a screw down back. I believe this is a 20 bar. Yeah, 20 bar, like most G-Shocks in terms of water resistance. All right, so let's do readability real quick. This is something I always love to highlight, particularly with digital watches. I've mentioned the 350 is just a monster at this. Readability from every angle is perfect. I think the F91W is pretty good. I mentioned a few other Casio digitals that I've had in the past that have not been very good. And this one is kind of a mix. This one's okay. There's going to be some glare, so you're not really going to be able to see. But when you get into some of the kind of up and down angles, you do start to lose, you know, I think you can see it right there. You do start to lose some visibility. It's not as bad as other Casios that I've seen, but it's definitely one of the worst G-Shocks that I've ever seen. Especially when the backlight's engaged. If you look right there, readability is pretty awful. In fact, I'm looking even out of the viewfinder and I can't see the time. And so that's kind of disappointing. I guess it's a little bit, you know, I expect it just because, you know, it's one of the cheaper G-Shocks, but hey, the F91W can obviously figure that out, so why can't a G-Shock? So readability, a little bit of a disappointment. The other issue of readability, I don't know if this is going to come in on camera, but there's kind of one issue where the module is too far apart from the plastic display there. I think you can see kind of the 3D there. You can also highlight the readability issue again. But the module is too far away from that plastic insert. And so what that means is you get more shadows, especially right now you can kind of see the shadows coming down. And so really if you're at any other angle, you're seeing a lot more of the kind of the dimensions or the shadows coming off of that insert than you're actually seeing of the display. If you look at something like this, this does have that insert, and in some ways it has the same problem. It's probably the same, distance off, but because it's not a segmented display, because you have this entire display right there, you're not getting that same issue. With this one, I think it's really noticeable, and it's something that that just kind of grows on you, and you can really start to see. You start to take notice of that plastic insert more, whereas I believe the intentions are that you view it as the the watch face, and instead I think it kind of cheapens the watch. So readability, all in all, not great. End of the day, how would I improve this watch? So a couple things, and when I look at this question, when I ask myself this question, I don't look at this and say, what would I do in a perfect world? Really what I'm looking at is, for the price point of this, what could be improved? To make this better. And so really I think there are three things. Number one, what I just talked about with that plastic insert, I think you would take away the segmented display and make this either a bi-display similar to the 350 or just one entire display. I think if you made the second counter one thing and moved it up, and then you would have your day date and your time, I just think it would improve readability of this guy a lot, especially considering the readability issues that you have. I think that would really help. So that's the first thing that would really not affect the price point at all, but I think would greatly improve the watch. The second thing, I would just kind of make the buttons protrude a little bit more. They're too recessed, and really they only need to be a couple more millimeters out, but right now they're just very difficult to press, and that's not a cost thing. That's just, I think, a design flaw. And then the third thing, and this may affect the cost a little bit, although I don't really think it would, I would change out the strap. So I would much prefer to have kind of a traditional G-Shock strap. I think it's cool they played with something like this. I do not think it works, and I don't really think it would add much to the cost. If you change those three things, I think this would be a really great watch at $45. However, as it currently sits, this is going to be a cut for me. I think it's a great watch for people to get into, but I think if I were to recommend a G-Shock, and this is not having actually used one, but having friends that use them, the 5600, something I'll probably be picking up pretty soon, hopefully. But I think an entry-level square G-Shock like that, probably a much better choice than this one. This is not bad, like I said, but I think they could have done a lot better. So there we go. Cut or carry, like I said, cut for me. This will go on to someone else who will love it more. And I have several more watch reviews coming soon, so stay tuned, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.